My sister's baby shower invitation demanded a $5,000 minimum gift to prove our love. I brought a cheap candle, and they laughed in my face. So, I sat down, smiled, and secretly canceled the $500,000 home purchase I arranged for them. Then, the realtor called. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The envelope was heavy. That was the first thing I noticed when my assistant, Sarah, placed it on my desk. It wasn't just standard cardstock. It was a thick, cream-colored, textured paper with gold foil lining the edges. It looked more like a summons to a royal gala than a piece of personal mail. I rubbed my temples, trying to massage away the migraine that had been building since my 6:00 a.m. site visit. Being a real estate developer and lead architect for my own firm meant my days were usually a blur of blueprints, contractor disputes, and zoning hearings. The silence of my office was a rare luxury, and I had intended to use it to review the final closing documents for the secret project I had been working on for months, Project Nest. It came via courier, Sarah said, lingering by the door with a hesitant look. The courier? Well, he said he was instructed to wait for a verbal confirmation of receipt. It seemed odd. Thanks, Sarah. That'll be all, I said, reaching for the letter opener. As the blade sliced through the wax seal, yes, an actual wax seal stamped with the initials J and A, I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. My sister, Jessica, didn't do anything halfway. She didn't do anything with her own money either. I pulled out the card. It was an intricate, multi-layered pop-up design revealing a bassinet surrounded by literal gold glitter that immediately shed onto my mahogany desk. You are cordially invited to the baby shower of the century, the cursive script announced. Honoring the future mother, Jessica, and the proud father, Archie. I scanned the date and time. It was 3 weeks away. Typical. But then my eyes drifted to the bottom third of the invitation, where a separate, smaller card was tucked into a velvet pocket. It was titled, The Registry and Gifting Guidelines. I frowned. Guidelines. I pulled the insert out and read the text. Then I blinked, shook my head, and read it again, certain that my exhaustion was causing me to hallucinate. To ensure our baby starts life with the abundance they deserve, we are foregoing traditional registries. Instead, we kindly ask that all guests demonstrate the depth of their affection through monetary contributions or luxury assets. To maintain the exclusivity of this event and the quality of our child's future, the minimum gifting tier begins at $5,000. Please note, your gift is a reflection of your love. Let's show this baby how much they matter. The air in my office suddenly felt very thin. $5,000 minimum. I sat back in my leather chair, the card trembling slightly in my hand. It wasn't just the amount. Though demanding $5,000 for a baby shower was clinically insane, it was the wording. Your gift is a reflection of your love. It was a transaction, a toll booth. I looked at the folder sitting next to the invitation on my desk. Inside were the deed, the title insurance, and the wire instructions for Project Nest. A 4-bedroom, Victorian-style home in the best school district in the city. A home I was buying, in full, for Jessica and Archie because they had been complaining for months about their cramped apartment. The purchase price was $525,000. I was set to wire the funds tomorrow morning. I looked back at the invitation, minimum gifting tier. I felt a cold, hard stone settle in my chest. I had spent my entire adult life trying to buy my way into my family's good graces. I had paid off my mother's car. I had paid for Jessica's wedding, which, ironically, lasted longer than the marriage likely would. I had funded Archie's failed crypto mining rig and his brief foray into luxury dropshipping. And now this. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. I needed to call our mother, Patricia. Surely she didn't know about this. Surely she would agree that this was tacky, offensive, and completely delusional. But as I dialed, a wave of nausea hit me. I realized that the betrayal wasn't just in the greed. It was in the complete lack of respect for me, the person who was actually footing the bill for their entire fantasy life. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. I whispered to the empty room, realizing that the sickness I felt wasn't a migraine. It was heartbreak. The phone rang 3 times before my mother picked up. "Caroline, did you get the invite?" Patricia's voice was high, shrill, and practically vibrating with excitement. "Isn't it stunning, Jess? Sika designed it herself." Well, she directed the graphic designer, but the vision was all hers. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady, though my hand was gripping the phone so hard my knuckles were white. "I'm looking at it right now. The glitter is currently ruining the finish on my desk." "Oh, stop being so dramatic. It's festive," she dismissed. "I'm reading the insert, Mom," I said, cutting to the chase. "The one about the gifting tears. Is this a joke? Is this some kind of viral prank she's trying to pull for her social media?" There was a pause on the other end, a silence that was heavy with judgment. "Why would it be a joke, Caroline?" Patricia asked, her tone shifting from excited to defensive. "Jessica wants the best for the baby. Archie and she are building a brand. They can't just have generic onesies and diapers from Target. It doesn't fit their aesthetic." "Their aesthetic?" I repeated, incredulous. "Mom, they are unemployed. Jessica hasn't worked since she was a barista 4 years ago, and Archie's business is currently a garage full of unsold phone cases. Asking people for $5,000 it's extortion." "It is not extortion," Patricia snapped. "It is a standard set by people of a certain caliber. And honestly, Caroline, of all people, I didn't expect you to be the cheap one. You have so much. Your sister has so little. Why are you always trying to tear her down?" I closed my eyes, the familiar script. You have so much, she has so little. "I'm not trying to tear her down," I said, fighting the urge to scream. "I'm trying to tell you that no one is going to come. Friends don't pay an entrance fee to a baby shower." "Real friends do," Patricia said haughtily. "And family certainly does. Jessica is very sensitive right now, Caroline. The doctor said she needs to avoid stress. If you call her and start with your bullying, I won't forgive you. Just pay the tier. Honestly, for you, 5,000 is like $5. Don't be selfish." "Don't be selfish." The words echoed in my head. I looked down at the file for the house. The house with the wraparound porch Jessica had pinned on her vision board. The house with the nursery I had already hired a contractor to paint in her favorite shade of sage green. I had planned to hand them the keys at the shower. I had planned to stand up during the toasts, present a small box with the key inside, and watch the relief wash over their faces. I wanted to be the hero. I wanted, just once, to be looked at with love instead of calculation. "You're right, Mom," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously calm register. "I shouldn't be selfish. I should ensure my gift truly reflects my feelings." "Good," Patricia said, clearly missing the shift in my tone. "I knew you'd come around. Oh, and Caroline, make sure you dress up. There will be photographers. We don't want you looking like you usually do. Workaholic chic isn't the vibe." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there for a long time, listening to the dial tone. My workaholic chic paid for her mortgage. My selfishness was about to put a roof over her favorite daughter's head. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I hadn't wired the money yet. I picked up the heavy, cream-colored invitation and flicked the edge with my thumb. They wanted a gift that reflected my love. They wanted a demonstration of value. I looked at the house contract. Clause 4.1, buyer reserves the right to terminate the agreement prior to the transfer of funds. "Okay," I whispered, a plan forming in the darkness of my mind. "I'll give you exactly what you asked for." To understand why I was even considering buying a $500,000 home for a sister who treated me like an ATM, you have to understand the dynamic of the Miller family. I was the eldest by 8 years. By the time Jessica was born, my father had already left, and my mother, Patricia, had decided that her second chance at happiness lay entirely in her new, perfect baby doll. Jessica was the golden child in the most literal sense. She was blonde, blue-eyed, and bubbly, everything my mother wanted to be. I was dark-haired, serious, and studious, traits my mother found boring and intense. While I was working 2 jobs in high school to save for college, Jessica was being enrolled in modeling classes and dance troupes I paid for. When I started my architecture firm, working 18-hour days and sleeping under my drafting table, Jessica was finding herself in Europe on my credit card, which Patricia had guilted me into giving her for emergencies. "She's just a free spirit, Caroline," Mom would say. "You're the strong one, you can handle the burden, she needs to fly." And then came Archie. I met Archie 2 years ago at a brunch I paid for. He was wearing sunglasses indoors and spent the entire meal checking his phone. He described himself as a serial entrepreneur, which I quickly learned was code for unemployable dreamer with a gambling problem. He fit right in. 3 days after the invitation arrived, I was summoned to a family strategy dinner at a trendy bistro downtown. I arrived 10 minutes early, but they were already there, ordering appetizers. "Caroline," Jessica squealed, not standing up to hug me. She patted her barely there baby bump. "Did you get the invite? Isn't it just everything?" "It's certainly something," I said, sliding into the booth. Archie looked up from a plate of oysters. "Yeah, we're really trying to filter out the noise, you know? We want people around our kid who understand value. High-value networks only." I stared at him. "It's a baby, Archie, not a hedge fund." He chuckled condescendingly. "That's a scarcity mindset, Caroline. You wouldn't understand. You're in, what is it, construction." "I own an architecture and development firm." I corrected him, flagging down a waiter to order a stiff drink. "Right, bricks and mortar," he waved a hand. "Old world stuff. We're building a digital legacy." "Speaking of legacy," Patricia chimed in, sipping her 3rd glass of wine. "Caroline, have you sorted out your contribution?" Jessica and Archie were looking at this darling custom nursery set from Italy. "It's about $8,000, but I told them, Auntie Caroline will probably want to cover the whole nursery." Jessica looked at me with wide, expectant eyes. "It would mean so much to us. The crib is hand-carved. It really fits the vibe of the new place." My heart skipped a beat. The new place. "Oh," Jessica giggled. "We're manifesting a new house. This apartment is just too small for a family of 3. We need space, a yard, a wraparound porch." She looked at me pointedly. They didn't know I had found the house. They didn't know I had the contract on my desk. They were just fishing, casting their lines into the bank of Caroline, expecting me to bite like I always did. "We're looking at homes in the 500,000 range," Archie added, leaning back. "Something that says success." "And how do you plan to get a mortgage?" I asked quietly. "With no income." Archie smirked. "We have investors." I looked at my mother. She was beaming. "Caroline, don't be so negative. Everything always works out for Jessica. The universe provides." I realized then that I was the universe. I was the investor. They assumed, without even asking, that I would co-sign or pay the down payment or simply buy it for them eventually if they whined loud enough. I took a sip of my drink, the ice clinking against the glass. "That sounds wonderful," I said, forcing a smile. "I hope the universe comes through for you." "Oh, it will," Jessica said, reaching for another oyster. "It always does." I watched them eat, devouring the expensive seafood I would inevitably pay for at the end of the night. They looked so confident, so secure in their exploitation of me. I thought about the realtor, Mrs. Gable, who was expecting my wire transfer in 48 hours. I thought about the keys sitting in her safe. "By the way," I said, casually checking my watch, "I'll be at the shower, and don't worry about the gift. I've been working on something substantial, something that will change your lives." Jessica clapped her hands. "I knew it. Mom, I told you, she's going to get us the Tesla." "Better," I said, my eyes cold. Patricia patted my hand. "That's my good girl, finally stepping up." I didn't pull my hand away. I just let it sit there, limp and cold, while my mind raced through the logistics of the coming weeks. They wanted a show, I would give them a show. I signaled for the check. It was the last meal I would ever buy them. The morning after the dinner, I didn't go to my office. Instead, I sat at my dining room table, surrounded by the silence of my own home. A home I had bought with my own money, renovated with my own hands, and paid for without asking anyone for a dime. On my laptop screen, the banking portal for Project Nest was open. The wire transfer was set for Friday at 2:00 p.m. The baby shower was Saturday at 1:00 p.m. Originally, I had timed it so the funds would clear, the title would transfer, and I could hand them the deed as the ultimate surprise. Now, I looked at that scheduled transaction with a mix of disgust and cold calculation. But before I made my final move, I needed to be sure. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. Archie had mentioned investors and digital legacies. My industry experience told me that usually meant high-interest credit cards and delusion. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus, a private investigator I used for vetting contractors and high-stakes business partners. "Caroline," Marcus answered on the first ring. "I usually only hear from you when a drywall guy tries to fake his insurance. What's up?" "I need a background check, Marcus. Financials, civil suits, outstanding debts, it's personal." "A name?" "Archie Reynolds. It's my brother-in-law. Give me 2 hours." While I waited, I called Mrs. Gable, the realtor handling the sale of the Victorian house. Mrs. Gable was a sweet, older woman who smelled like lavender and closed deals like a shark. She loved me because I never wasted her time. "Caroline, dear," she chirped. "I have the keys polished and ready. I even put a big red bow on the front door like you asked. It's going to be such a magical moment for your sister." "Mrs. Gable," I said, keeping my voice professional, "there might be a slight change in plans. I'm reviewing the final closing conditions." "Oh," her tone sharpened instantly. "Is there a problem with the title? I checked the liens myself." "No, the property is perfect. The problem is with the beneficiaries. Listen, I'm keeping the wire scheduled, but I might need to pull it at the last second depending on some liquidity issues. If the funds don't arrive by Friday close of business, what happens?" "Well," she hesitated, "the sellers are very anxious. They have a bridge loan. If the funds aren't there by Friday, they said they're pulling the contract Monday morning and keeping the earnest money. They have a backup offer." "Perfect," I said. "Caroline, that implies you might lose the house." "I know, Mrs. Gable, if the wire doesn't go through and the deal falls apart. I want you to call the intended homeowner directly. Not me. Call Jessica." "But Jessica isn't the buyer. You are." "I know, but she thinks it's hers. If the deal dies, I want her to hear it from an official source. Call her during the party on Saturday. Tell her the financing collapsed." There was a long pause. Mrs. Gable was smart. She knew family drama when she smelled it. "Saturday afternoon," Mrs. Gable repeated slowly. "I suppose I could update her on the status then. Is everything all right, dear?" "I'm just doing my due diligence, Mrs. Gable." My computer pinged, an email from Marcus. I opened the attachment and felt my jaw tighten. It was worse than I thought. Archie didn't have investors. He had 3 maxed-out credit cards, a repossessed BMW from 2 years ago, and most damning of all, a pending lawsuit from a previous landlord for unpaid rent totaling $12,000. And there, in the recent activity section of his joint account with Jessica, a deposit of $5,000 from Patricia Miller. My mother. My mother, who claimed she couldn't afford to fix her own water heater last winter. A bill I paid, was funneling cash to Archie so he could pretend to be rich. They weren't just entitled, they were conspiring. They were bleeding me to feed his ego. I looked at the wire transfer on my screen. $525,000. I clicked edit. I didn't cancel it yet. That would be too easy. Instead, I changed the authorization setting. Require manual confirmation via mobile app. I leaned back, the trap was set. Now I just had to deliver the bait. Saturday arrived with a bright, mocking sunshine. The baby shower of the century was being held at the manor, a rented estate on the outskirts of the city that cost more for a day than most people made in a month. As I drove up the winding driveway in my practical, 3-year-old SUV, I saw the valet stand. The valet looked at my car like I had just pulled up in a tractor. "Name?" he asked, not opening my door. "Caroline Miller, sister of the guest of honor." He checked a tablet. "Right, self-park is in the lower lot. The circle is for VIPs and luxury vehicles only." I stared at him. "I paid for the deposit on this venue." "Policy is policy, ma'am." I laughed, a short, dry sound. "Of course." I parked in the mud at the bottom of the hill and walked up. My heels sank into the grass, but I didn't care. I was carrying a small, recycled paper gift bag. Inside was a generic congratulations card I had written in the car and a vanilla-scented candle I bought at a dollar store. The price sticker, $1.00, was still on the bottom. I had checked twice to make sure. At the massive double doors of the estate, there was a literal velvet rope and a table staffed by 2 women I didn't recognize. They looked like Instagram models, flawless makeup, bored expressions, and iPads. "Welcome to the baby gala," one said, not making eye contact. "Name?" "Caroline Miller." She tapped on her screen, her eyebrows shot up. "Oh, the sister, you're marked as a Tier 1 contributor. We were told to expect a substantial physical asset or a certified check." She looked at my small paper bag. Then she looked behind me, expecting a delivery truck. "Just this," I said, placing the bag on the table. The woman stared at the bag. She poked it with a manicured fingernail. "I'm sorry, I think there's a misunderstanding. The invitation clearly stated the gifting minimums. We have a card reader here if you'd prefer to make a direct transfer." "No misunderstanding," I smiled, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. The invitation said the gift should be a R. Afflection of my love, this is exactly that. The woman exchanged a look with her partner. "I can't check you in with this. I need to call the coordinator." She tapped her earpiece. "Patricia, yes, we have Caroline here. There's an issue with the entry fee." "Yes, okay." She looked at me with pity. "Your mother is coming." A moment later, the heavy doors swung open. Patricia stormed out, looking like a mother of the bride in a floor-length sequined gown. Jessica followed, waddling slightly in a dress that looked like it cost more than my first car. "Caroline," Patricia hissed, grabbing my arm and pulling me away from the check-in girls. "What is the meaning of this? They told me you brought a bag." "A gift," I corrected. Jessica snatched the bag from my hand. She looked inside. She pulled out the candle. She turned it over and saw the sticker. The silence that followed was absolute. "Is this a joke?" Jessica asked, her voice trembling. "Is this a prank? Are you filming this for TikTok?" "No," I said calmly. "It's a candle, vanilla, it's very soothing." Jessica's face turned a mottled red. "You are ruining my day. You are deliberately trying to humiliate me in front of Archie's investors." "I thought you wanted a gift that reflected how I felt," I said, locking eyes with her. "After the way you've treated me, after demanding $5,000 just to see my future niece or nephew, this is what you get, Jessica. Actually, I think I overspent." "You selfish bitch," Jessica spat. "Jessica," Patricia gasped, looking around to see if anyone heard. Then she turned her fury on me. "Caroline, fix this. Now, write a check. Archie told everyone you were buying the house. Do you know how bad he's going to look if you show up with a dollar store candle?" "That sounds like Archie's problem," I said. "If you don't pay," Patricia whispered, her voice low and venomous, "you are not family, you are a guest, and a poor one at that." "Fine," I said, "treat me like a guest." Patricia glared at me, calculating. She knew she couldn't kick me out without causing a scene. "Fine," she snapped. "Let her in, but put her at table 9, in the back by the kitchen. Jessica threw the candle back into the bag and shoved it at my chest. Don't expect a thank you note. I never expect anything from you, Jessica, I said. That's why I'm never disappointed. Table 9 was exactly as promised, tucked behind a large decorative pillar, right next to the swinging doors of the catering kitchen. It was the table for the obligatory invites. A distant cousin who smelled like cigarettes, a former neighbor who looked confused, and me. I sat down, placing the paper bag on the pristine white tablecloth. It looked absurd next to the crystal centerpieces. From my vantage point, I could see the VIP table on the raised dais. Jessica sat on a throne, a literal velvet throne, flanked by Archie and Patricia. They were laughing, drinking champagne, sparkling cider for Jessica, and accepting envelopes from guests who looked terrified of not paying enough. I watched a friend of ours, a sweet girl named Sarah from high school, hand over a box that looked like jewelry. Jessica opened it, smirked, and tossed it into a pile behind her without even showing it to the room. It wasn't enough. I pulled out my phone, 1:45 p.m. The wire transfer for the house was sitting in the pending queue of my banking app. It was flashing a notification. Action required. Confirm transfer of $525,000 to Gable Realty Trust. I stared at the button, confirm, cancel. My thumb hovered. Look at her, a voice drifted over from the nearby table. I glanced up. It was Patricia, whispering to one of her bridge club friends, unaware that the acoustics of the room carried her voice perfectly to my corner. Sitting there with that cheap bag, Patricia whispered. It's honestly pathological. She's always been jealous of Jessica. Caroline has money, sure, but she has no life, no man, no joy. She wanted to punish Jessica today. How embarrassing, the friend clucked, to be that petty to your own sister. Oh, don't worry, Patricia laughed, touching her pearl necklace. She'll pay up, she always does. Archie says she's buying them the Victorian on Elm Street. She's just being dramatic for attention. She's desperate for us to beg her. I looked back down at my phone. She always does. The certainty in her voice was what did it. The absolute, unshakable belief that I was a resource to be mined, not a person to be loved. They didn't want me here. They wanted my signature. I looked at Archie. He was standing up, tapping a spoon against his glass. The room quieted down. Ladies and gentlemen, Archie boomed, using a microphone that was turned up too high. Thank you for coming to celebrate the future of the Reynolds dynasty. Applause. We have some amazing announcements today, Archie continued, grinning like a shark. Big things are happening. We're moving. Up in the world, literally. He looked directly at me. He winked. He thought the deal was done. He thought the money was already gone from my account. He thought I was sitting in the back, sulking, but that I had already signed the papers because I was the good girl. I looked at the screen of my phone. The numbers were black and stark against the white background. $525,000. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. I tapped cancel. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to cancel this transaction? This action cannot be undone. I smiled. I took a sip of my water. I tapped yes. The screen refreshed. Transaction canceled. Funds returned to available balance. I put the phone face down on the table. And now, Archie bellowed, I want to make a toast to the woman who makes it all possible. My beautiful wife, Jessica, and to the abundance that flows into our lives. To abundance, the crowd echoed. I saw a movement near the entrance. Mrs. Gable, the realtor, had just walked in. She looked around, clutching her phone. She looked worried. She spotted me in the back. I gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. She looked at the stage, where Archie was raising his glass. She hesitated, then began to weave through the tables toward the dais. Archie was still talking. We really believe that if you put good energy out, big rewards come back. We're expecting some massive news any minute now. Mrs. Gable reached the edge of the stage. She waved to get Jessica's attention. Jessica looked down, annoyed at the interruption during her husband's speech. Then she saw who it was, the realtor. Jessica's face lit up. She grabbed Archie's arm. She thought Mrs. Gable was bringing the keys. She thought this was the moment. "Oh, look," Jessica squealed into the microphone. "Our realtor is here. I think she has a special surprise for us." The room cheered. Patricia clapped her hands giddily. I sat back in my chair, crossed my legs, and watched. Mrs. Gable didn't step up with keys. She leaned in close to Jessica, whispering urgently. She held up her phone, showing Jessica something on the screen. I saw the color drain from Jessica's face. It happened in slow motion. Her smile faltered, then froze, then vanished completely. Her skin went from rosy flush to a sickly, ghost white. Archie stopped talking mid-sentence. "Babe, what is it? The keys." Mrs. Gable stepped back, looking uncomfortable. The room went deadly silent. Everyone was watching Jessica. Jessica looked up. Her eyes scanned the room, bypassing the VIPs, bypassing her mother, and locking directly onto me in the back corner. I picked up my $1 candle, raised it in a silent toast, and smiled. The silence that followed my gesture was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster, the drawing back of the ocean before the tsunami hits. Jessica stood on the dais, the microphone still clutched in her hand, trembling so violently that the jewelry on her wrist rattled against the metal mesh. Her eyes were fixed on me, wide and unblinking, filled with a mixture of confusion and a dawning, horrific realization. "What did she say?" Archie barked, stepping toward Mrs. Gable, his face flushing a deep, aggressive crimson. "What do you mean canceled? The wire was scheduled. I saw the email." Mrs. Gable, a woman of immense professional dignity, took a half step back, clearly repulsed by his tone. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice was crisp, practiced, and carried perfectly through the silent room. "Mr. Reynolds, the purchase agreement was contingent on the transfer of funds by close of business today. The buyer, the actual buyer, has exercised her right to terminate the contract. The seller has already accepted a backup offer. The property is gone." "Gone," Jessica whispered into the hot mic. The word echoed through the speakers, ghostly and broken. But the nursery, the paint." Then the shock broke. The reality shattered the paralysis, and Jessica's face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. She didn't look like a glowing mother-to-be anymore. She looked like a child whose toy had been snatched away. "You," she screamed, pointing a manicured finger at me. "You did this." The room gasped. Phones were raised instantly. I could see the little red recording lights blinking from every table. The influencers and high-value network guests Archie had invited were about to get the content of a lifetime. I stood up slowly. I didn't rush. I smoothed the front of my dress, picked up my purse, and began to walk toward the exit. I had no intention of making a scene. I had made my point. But Patricia wouldn't let it end there. "Caroline," my mother shrieked, scrambling up from her seat and rushing down the steps of the dais to block my path. She looked deranged, her sequined dress catching the light as she threw her arms out. "Where do you think you're going? You fix this. You get on that phone and you fix this right now." "There's nothing to fix, Mom," I said, my voice calm, contrasting sharply with her hysteria. "I made a business decision. The investment no longer seemed sound." "Investment?" Jessica yelled, grabbing the microphone stand for support. "It's my house. You promised. You let us on." I stopped. I turned to face them. The entire room was watching. The waiters had stopped serving. The DJ had cut the ambient music. "I promised," I repeated, my voice projecting clearly. "I was buying a $500,000 home for you, a gift, a surprise. And how did you repay that generosity before it was even given? You sent me a bill. You told me that my love was only valid if it came with a price tag of $5,000. "That's standard," Archie yelled, trying to regain control of the narrative. It's about standards, Caroline, something you wouldn't understand with your penny-pinching mindset. Penny-pinching? I laughed, and for the first time, I let the anger bleed into my voice. Archie, I paid for this party. I paid for the deposit on this venue. I paid for the catering. I paid for the open bar you're currently drinking from, and you have the audacity to call me cheap because I didn't buy a ticket to your ego trip. We are building a legacy, Archie shouted, his voice cracking. We have investors, we don't need your charity. What investors, Archie? I asked, taking a step toward him. The ones who are paying off your 3 maxed-out credit cards, or the ones helping you with the $12,000 lawsuit from your last landlord. The color drained from Archie's face, so fast it looked like a magic trick. How do you know that? He stammered. I did my due diligence, I said, addressing the room now. Because that's what people with actual money do. We check who we're investing in, and I realized I wasn't investing in a family. I was investing in a black hole. I looked at Jessica. She was crying now, ugly, sobbing tears that smeared her professional makeup, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of loss. She wasn't crying for her sister. She was crying for the porch. She was crying for the status she had just lost. You're jealous, Jessica sobbed, reverting to the childhood taunt that had always been her shield. You've always been jealous of me because Mom loves me more, because I'm happy and you're alone. It was the arrow she always kept in her quiver, the one that was supposed to pierce my heart and make me apologize. But it bounced off. I am alone, I nodded, looking at my mother, who was staring at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. But I'm not the one who just lost a $500,000 asset because I was too greedy to accept a candle. I'm debt-free, I'm successful, and as of today, I'm free of you. I turned to the table where I had been sitting. Enjoy the candle, Jessica, I said. It really is soothing. You're going to need it when the bill for the rest of this party comes due. I canceled the check for the remaining balance on my way in. I walked out of the double doors, past the stunned valet, and down the hill to my car. Behind me, I could hear the shouting start. I heard Mrs. Gable trying to explain the escrow laws. I heard Archie screaming at a waiter. I got into my car, locked the doors, and took a deep breath. The air smelled like rain and wet grass. It smelled like freedom. The aftermath was exactly as messy as I expected, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one cleaning it up. By the time I got home that afternoon, my phone had 42 missed calls. 30 were from Patricia, 10 were from Jessica, 2 were from Archie. I listened to one voicemail from Patricia. Caroline, you have destroyed this family. Jessica is in the hospital. Well, not the hospital, but she's in bed with stress. Do you know how much the venue charged us? They wouldn't let us leave until Archie put his credit card down and it declined. We had to call your Aunt Linda. It was humiliating. Call me back and transfer the money immediately, or so help me God. I deleted it, then I blocked the number. I blocked Jessica, I blocked Archie. I spent that Sunday hiking. I turned my phone off and walked 6 miles up a trail that overlooked the city. I sat on a rock and looked down at the skyline, picking out the buildings I had helped design. I realized that for years, I had been building foundations for everyone else while letting them chip away at my own. Monday morning, I went to work. I called a meeting with my financial advisor and my lawyer. I want to restructure my estate, I told them. Remove Patricia Miller and Jessica Reynolds as beneficiaries. Remove them from the emergency contact list. Remove them from everything. Had circulated, not virally, but enough. The investors Archie had been courting saw it. It's hard to pitch a digital empire when you're heard through Aunt Linda, who was now acting as a reluctant Switzerland, that they had to give up their apartment. They moved into my mother's 2-bedroom nursery you wanted to give her. I drive past that house sometimes. It has a swing set in the yard now. Another family lives there. I know I can't ask you for anything. I know I don't deserve to, but I just wanted you to know that I kept the candle. I lit it the night Archie left. It smells like vanilla. I'm sorry. Jessica. I sat on my patio, holding the house. I thought about the check. I thought about the years of you have so much, she has so little. I went inside to my desk. I pulled out a piece of my own stationery, simple, elegant, professional. It grows over time, but only if you contribute to it yourself. I mailed it the next morning. I didn't unblock their numbers. I didn't invite them over. I didn't step back into the role of the savior. The check was to build. And this time, the only people allowed inside were the ones who brought more to the table than just an empty plate.